Kill or Be Killed podcast with Damian Ross, founder and master instructor of the Self-Defense Company.
Hey, Damian here, and welcome to the Kill or Be Killed podcast. And today's subject is killing, lethal use of force. You know, we've got a weird relationship with this word and the notion of killing and violence. It's, again, the martial arts strange. We're allowed to practice it. You know, we're allowed to think about it, but you're not allowed to actually say it. You know, in fact, this martial arts is based on this contradiction of using violence to lead to nonviolence, or training to be violent, or training to use violence in order to live a peaceful lifestyle. We've all heard the sayings, if you want peace, you train for war. I learned to fight so I don't have to fight. And I think, this exemplifies that contradiction within the martial arts perfectly. To be honest, though, I think there's a level here where thinking of this will eventually cause you to hesitate and may tactically put you at a disadvantage, when you pull the trigger. In fact, there's a part, obviously, if you know me, we don't really pull any punches with any of this stuff, because, the reality is you need to keep, start calling it what it is and accepting that violence is a real possibility, instead of, training our asses off in hopes that nobody calls our bluff. So, that being said, nobody's talking about, just completely, losing your mind or doing something that is, or exhibiting like antisocial behavior, because the reality is, we're not violent people, meaning that we're not sociopaths. We're not, looking to inflict harm on other human beings. It's just simply accepting the fact that violence can happen. And anytime two living things and try to impose their will on it over each other using force, people get hurt and possibly die. Again, I can't stress this enough. A normal, sane person doesn't like the idea of harming another human being. That notion should, get you sick to some extent. Killing on its own should never be glorified, but killing someone who's trying to rape or murder you, that's a different story. We usually don't use terms like killing, but we use terms like stop the threat and do whatever is necessary. But you have to realize that, doing whatever necessary may result in that, person, that thing that is trying to, impose their will on you, use violence to get what they want from you, put you in harm's way without any regard for you or your loved ones. This is something that, we have to realize that may be necessary if you were to be put in this situation. Like I said, we don't talk about it, but I bet, there are a lot of you out there, myself included, who have said or thought, I'm going to fucking kill that guy. The truth is, when your life is on the line, you need to let your instinct do what it's designed to do. And that's when you say, I want to kill that guy, that's really your hardwiring of, your personal defense mechanisms to go to that, it's going to that dark place. So what you need to do, is figure out how to leverage that and use that when necessary to, protect yourself and your loved ones, period. Like I said, for normal, people, we've been engineered like this from, since we were, single cell organisms or whatever, Adam and Eve. I don't know what you're into or what what you're prescribed to, but whatever. It's in our DNA. It is in our instinct to protect ourselves and our loved ones. Now, modern society, for normal people who every day go to work and school, this is not that easy to channel that dark place. In fact, when you go to that place without the proper training, you actually overload. David Grossman, if you don't know who he is, Colonel David Grossman, he talks a lot about school shooters, and he does a lot of training. Was a West Point instructor. He's a former Ranger. I've gone to a couple of his seminars about this type, this mindset and what happens when you are really truly believe you're facing a life or death situation, and that's what happens is your hormone induced fear. Excuse me. Wow. Yeah, COVID. So your hormone induced fear triggers what's called your SNS, sympathetic nervous system, and your SNS gets activated. And that's actually your body. Fear is your body telling you to get ready for combat. It's fight or flight. The problem is what happens is if you don't know how to properly channel it, you'd actually go into overload and freeze and shut down and possibly black out. Let's just say 1,000 years ago when we were hunting and protecting ourselves, this was a part of your everyday life, so you could more or less, you're equipped to handle that. If I'm putting myself in physical danger, or I'm fighting somebody from another tribe or village, you are, your body is kind of equipped to deal with this stuff. Then you probably died when you were 30, but still, needless to say, we're still that person. It's just that technology and civilization has progressed to a point where we don't really use it and we don't know how to use it. The only thing that really comes close to this for like your regular person is road rage. This happens because the speed of the vehicles, which naturally still at that primal level, we're not really equipped to kind of get used to it. So there's a part of us deep down that's still kind of freaking out when we're in the car. So the speed of the vehicles, taps into that potential of death, and that gets into that SNS activation. And that's why people, lose their mind on the road when you get cut off, when somebody, when you have a near accident, it's like we overreact because subconsciously we believe, and rightfully so to some degree, right, that someone's gonna, that your life is gonna be in danger and you'll be seriously injured or killed. So, we're engineered to deal with death and killing. So it's in us. Yet we practice martial arts that tell us killing and violence is bad. Yet we practice techniques that we believe are lethal and enjoy the idea of having black belt. Having a black belt makes you a quote-unquote trained killer. Yet, to be honest, after I forgot my first black belt, I never really thought I was trained to kill anything. I knew what to do when somebody grabbed my wrist, which no one ever did, and I knew how to spar, and I knew how to grapple, but it wasn't really about kill or be killed and all-out survival, though we talked about it a lot. And we practiced some techniques that we thought were lethal, like the karate eye poke, where you're just like kind of just going up and, doing a quick little switch of the eyes, or, that poor excuse for an eye gouge, or simply, striking at an area like the throat or temple would cause instant death. We walk around believing that, just that kill shot, and everyone knows that. And every martial artist does this. When you do your self-defense move, you take them down to the ground, and then you finish them with a deadly blow. Everyone practices it. Yet, when people post this stuff, and even though everybody practices it, you'll get, sued for that, you'll do this, that. I mean, that's the legality of it. We'll get into, but the fact is, it's like, we're practicing these techniques in regular martial arts or all martial arts, and we're thinking about, I hit him in the throat, he's done. Well, not really. I mean, the fact is, yes, these are, striking somebody in the throat, in the temple, and gouging their eyes, when done properly with enough force and enough repetition, will cause severe trauma or death. No doubt about it. But again, the way we're traditionally taught these techniques, it's like they're a death touch. And, simply, striking an area doesn't instantly cause this problem. There are degrees from slight discomfort to, death would be the ultimate, right? I mean, not ultimate, but would be the most impact you would have on your target. So, but again, that depends on how hard you hit it, how many times and the frequency at which you hit it. The same goes for the knee. Everyone, when I was really big in karate where it's like, kick the knee, 12 pounds of pressure, whatever, it varies, to be honest. I don't know what the exact tensile strength of a knee is, even though I've blown out, I tore my ACL. I've done various things to my legs and my body over the decades, but to be honest, I've been kicked in the knee. Nothing happened, but then that's not the guy's fault. I mean, it's whatever. I mean, it's a joint, so it needs to be locked in position. It needs to be hyperextended and be hit in a manner from the front or the side where, with the knee being immobile, can't, so it can't move. It's locked, and then it needs to dislocate to cause ligament damage. Now, if you catch it and twist it, you're gonna, you'll break stuff. But just, striking at it, it's got to be done in a way that is, that this thing is locked and you hit it at the correct angle and, it does what it does. It gives away. So, coming from a life of martial arts, and then obviously the combat sports, on my background, I wrestled since I was a kid, wrestled in college. Then I later got into judo, which I love very much, and always did karate. Then I got into the jiu-jitsu, and then in '89, found combatives and started training with Carl Sesteri. And if you don't know who Carl is, I mean, you'll see there's footage of him on the site. There's reference to him all over the place. Carl is he's the man when it comes to reality self-defense. And in '89, I met him. Carl's background real quickly was he trained in karate and judo with Yuneska Sensei, who's also my judo sensei. He after high school, he enlisted in the Army, went through Ranger School, was a Ranger, did his 4 years in the military, came out, was it's funny, and then what they were teaching in the military at that time was Taekwondo, which usually follows suit because it's like, what they're teaching with military combatives, it starts to be like, kind of flavor of the month or what's trending. So when you're looking at, what's happening now with MMA and BJJ, which makes sense because there was one time it was Jeet Kune Do, which we're calling it. Paul Vunak was teaching guys because it was all about Bruce Lee. Before that, it was Taekwondo. Before that, it was judo. And before that, it was combatives. Before there was really any agenda for, what my style is, it was just what works. And this is why, besides I didn't, gravitating towards, combatives because of this approach and the research and the study that was done behind it, it was done at a time where there really wasn't an agenda for promoting a style or a system. It was like, okay, people are dying and we need to figure out, we need to figure out the truth about this shit, or else, we're going to keep getting our ass kicked. This goes back to Fairburn and O'Neill and Sykes and all these guys from the World War II era, Shanghai, early 1900s, so forth. So, but be that as it may, so I met Carl in '89. He, again, about Carl's history, he was in, so this is how the story was relayed to me. I didn't ask him about it specifically, though he did offer to take me to talk to a guy, but it wasn't important to me. I knew Carl for who he was, and I loved him. He's the godfather of my oldest daughter. So Carl was going to go back into the Army. He was a Roselle Park cop. It's Roselle Park, New Jersey. He was rooming with other guys in law enforcement, and they were having a going away party for him. He was leaving in a few days. They were posing with weapons and again, honestly, this is where this shit gets sketchy. And all these guys are, trained with weapons. They're law enforcement. They're, Marines, and freaking, Bob Casper, who's dead, was there taking the picture. So these guys are posing for a picture of, they're all holding guns and like kind of pointing them at each other. And then one of the guys thought it would be a good idea, I don't know who, if we pulled the triggers to make it look real. I don't know why they would do that. It doesn't make any sense to me why these guys would do that. But this is what I was told. So, again, it's sketchy. I'm not going to... Whatever. So I'm meeting him. I'm like, 20 years old. So I'm getting told the story. I'm 30 years old. So I really, I'm not going to be like, that sounds like bullshit. Though I did say, I'm like, it sounds like it doesn't make sense to me. And that was when it was like, well, we can go meet this guy. And I'm like, no. I'm like, if you say it is, it is. But I didn't know. I didn't need to go meet whoever he was going to take me to go see. So he takes a picture. Bob Casper is taking the picture. So cops show up. So there was a round in the chamber. He shoots this guy, one of his roommates, who's another cop, in the head. Cops show up. Again, this is how the story was told to me. Cops show up. They got rid of the film and the camera. This is when cameras had film. This is early 80s. So Carl's about 23 years old. So he wound up, the cops came, they're like, you're taking a picture, they're looking for the film, and one of the guys, Bob Casper, who is his partner, handed the cop the film. It was like thrown out, it was on the ground outside, he picked it up and gave it to him. So that was kind of like where the rift between Carl and Bob started or happened. Needless to say, Carl went away. He was in the system he got convicted of manslaughter. He was in the system at Rikers. He started in Rikers, and if you know anything about the prison system, they move guys around a lot. So he went in at Rikers, and as a police officer, technically cop killer, he wasn't getting love from anybody. He was a young guy, 23 years old. So he said, he's like, all I did was lift weights, train, and get ready. And at this time, he started getting into the combatives when he was a cop through Charlie Nelson turned him on. He started doing research with it, and then, wound up, these guys are still alive. So Carl is brilliant, well-read, educated, even though not in the classical sense. But he would watch every video and get every book on this stuff because he was searching for the truth. He grew up learning this stuff, but it was like, okay, what's sport, what's ceremony, what's actually self-defense? And that's what brought him into this world. So Carl goes into prison, and I'll relay an email that I got. Let me just look it up. This is the story I got from this individual. I'll just read it to him because this story, this guy was a former CO and got, he got this story told to him. He goes, sure, brother. As you know, Carl was in Rahway prison from 1984 to 1989. But they put him in population, which is a death sentence for a cop, especially a white cop. But Carl basically kicked ass and was respected. Now that feat is virtually impossible. However he did it, I know because I spoke to several old school 5%ers who verified it. Shit. They said he used to spar with James Scott, who was the top-rated light heavyweight who fought out of Rahway prison. That's what fascinated me. I worked as a corrections officer before I was a cop, so I've seen firsthand the sheer brutality of violence in jail fights. This is what changed my martial arts training. Like you, I'm a former D1 athlete, a football scholarship, but I won't get into that. He boxed, and brown belt from Yanni, black belt Nike Jiu-Jitsu from another guy who's passed away. So that is who Carl was. And I met him in 1989 after he got out of jail. So I trained with Carl from like 89 to like 92. He had a falling out with my brother. I hooked up with him again in 98. And when I first left him, he was, 220 pounds, about 5'10". When I saw him again, just a handful of years later, he was like 145 pounds. And he wasn't training, wasn't doing anything. I mean, he would hit the Makawara and sit in his house, smoke cigarettes, watch videos. And here I am thinking, like, this is like beyond Bruce Lee to me, the greatest resource besides loving him and knowing all that. My selfish standpoint from my own training, was like, here's a guy I want to be like and train like, and he's dying. So I want to get as much information that he's willing to give me for my own benefit and for my students' benefit. He was the ultimate. So, that's where, selfish. I wasn't thinking about putting the self-defense training system together. I wasn't thinking about any of this stuff. All I was thinking about was like me training and doing that. And that's when I started training at Unesco's dojo in Cranford, because I wanted to train with Yanni and and that's it. I fell in love with judo. Got my second degree black belt in that, and placed in the nationals a couple times. So he was directing me, and all that while we're putting together the syllabus, which was basically my training platform. And the first and foremost purpose of the training platform was that he, was that if anyone was going to come to me and train with me, within 6 to 10 weeks, if they trained like 2-3 times a week, they should be able to defend themselves. That's it. The rest of the stuff was about a martial arts journey. It was about learning judo and jiu-jitsu. It was about, knockdown karate. It was about developing, other skills and having that full martial arts experience, which is great and I love. But for the most part, for self-defense, you didn't need all that. That was like underneath. That was behind it. But your foundation for most adults who are coming to train with you, they just want to learn how to protect themselves. That's my job. Like, you don't need to be endeared to me to train for the rest of your life. You train, you do the training system. If you do it like 8 to 12 months, like, no joke, we're done. You get certified, especially if you get like certified with our instructors and do all that other stuff. Yeah, you can do it. Totally. On your own time, all that crap. So enough of that shit. So what I want to talk about is Carl, after, several years, I wanted to get together, like really, like we always, it was the same stuff though. We're talking about lethal ending, and I'm like, what if we put together a training program of just lethal combatives, lethal tactics? And, this was going to be only released to, at the time we had an instructor program, only for like black belt level guys. Okay, because they need to know the truth about this stuff and the science behind it. Like I mentioned before, you had, things that you thought were lethal or were told were lethal that weren't lethal at all. Like flicking somebody in their, Adam's apple, ain't gonna kill them. All right, so what does it really take? Obviously, besides firearms, because, okay. But it came to like edge weapons, impact weapons, and bare hands. What does it really take? Really, you either die from blunt force trauma, asphyxiation, or loss of blood. That's really it. So, it is about how to most effectively use those three, reasons why, things die, mammals die, and put it into a training program. And it's like around 2005, 2006, we put it together, filmed it at my place in Pompton Lakes, and it was like Carl's last video that I ever filmed. And he was kind of like, first he didn't want to do it, and I'm like, all right, fine, I'll be honest with you. And I go, then later, I don't know what happened, He changed his mind, and he's like, yeah, he goes, let's do it. So we filmed the program Operation Phoenix and released it to like a handful of guys. So probably like, I don't know, like maybe 100 people at the time. So Operation Phoenix was released, and then like a few months later, Carl dies. August 2007, I get the call, and yeah, he's gone. So that's it. I mean, we never, I think we released it just to the instructors, and then I forgot about it. Then I had a falling out with my business partner, who shall remain nameless, and launched a self-defense company, did everything, have everything, and literally forgot about this video until I was going through the lawsuit we won, and I'm kind of cleaning everything up, getting rid of files and all that stuff, and I found that I found it, and I was like, holy crap, there it is. And now I'm like, what do I do with this freaking thing? It's so significant because it's Carl who knew firsthand, based on his professional and personal experience, about what it takes to fight for your life. There's not Bruce Lee. We talk about Bruce Lee, about how he had these, gang fights, and I'm sure he got into street fights. We all did. And I'm sure that, he could have been led down a wrong path. Yours truly as well, if it wasn't for sports. Who knows what I'm doing. So, yeah, I get that. Not taking anything away from him. But, here's a guy who, lived it, trained as a martial artist, served his country, was a cop, went to prison, and studied this stuff for real. And was so intelligent that he could, analyze it and then apply the principles based on, what he knew to, and he could articulate it. The problem is he never out of school. He trained places for a while. Even when we would train together, it would be like, a stretch of a few months, but then you try to get him on the phone. Don't forget, his health was not great. And even when he was healthy and I was training with him, it would be like, we'd go for, a few months, and then he'd be gone for a month. Then we'd go for another month or a few weeks, and then he'd be gone. So, he wasn't one to stay in one spot too long. Not so much physically, but I think mentally. So, anyway. So, I found, it's a lot of sauce. So I found this video, and I'm like, what do I do with it? I'm like, I'm not going to put it out there to the general public because Carl wouldn't want that, and I really don't think it should be out there. So the only way we make it available is for people who are on the program and here. And that's it. I said, we don't advertise it, and every once in a while we open up the books and let, about 100 people in to get it. And we stick with that 100 because that was the number of the original instructors that we had. And it just, I just don't want everybody to have this. And if you're willing to do it and get it, then that's at least the way we can control it. So, the historical significance of the Operation Phoenix program is, it can't be understated. And the reality is, it can't be duplicated. Listen, I love instructing. I love helping people. I love what I do. But Carl, when he delivers the information and talks about it, look, no shit. I've been into some shit, but nothing near what he was. I emulated my training after him. I, trained with his instructor. I, did certain things, except, go to jail would be one of them. But to see him teach us information. And if you look at the other one, like the old school series and things like that in the elite program, I mean, you're going to see like stuff you never see or hear from again. There's a lot of people who walk the walk and look the part, but when you see it comes from a certain place of intelligence and experience, it can't be duplicated. So, when we talk about killing and violence, I'm like, you really, to understand it is to also understand what can be done when you're, what you're doing and how dangerous it is you're doing. It's like, what is lethal force? How do I really dislocate someone's neck? How do I really asphyxiate someone or, bludgeon them in a way that I know, would do the most damage? It's important to know this information. I'm not saying you're going to go do it, but, again, it is part of understanding what we call interpersonal violence. So, we make this available if we do. Again, if you have the means, please, get Operation Phoenix. Again, it's like the historical impact of this video in our world of reality, self-defense, and combat cannot be understated. So, look, I'd like to thank you for taking the time to spend with me on this winter day. And look, if you have any questions or comments, please post them underneath. You can contact customer service as well, but we respond to both. And if again, don't be a stranger. Please feel free to take a look at the rest of the podcast and hang out. And again, if you have any questions, just post them and we'll get to them. Thanks again for finding us. And until next time, train on.